Welcome to the Supply Chain Tech Podcast with Rombi. In this episode, we dive deep into a topic that's been widely discussed because of the COVID-19 vaccines. It's nothing but pharma cold chain management. We have with us Brett Marshall from Zuellig Pharma to explore this topic. Brett heads Zuellig's quality assurance practice, but moreover, he spent a lot of years managing supply chain and distribution in pharma to provide us with a holistic picture. Brett, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure having you here. I'd like to begin with my first question to you. You have spent a lot of time in the pharma quality and distribution space. So what got you into this and what do you really like about your work every day?
Thanks, Prem. So yeah, it's I think when I left high school, actually, I was a frustrated vet, like a few other friends that I had at the time. But I finished up studying transport and logistics management at RMIT, and I sort of found that it was an industry that I really enjoyed working in. I worked with Linfox to begin with in Australia, so I cut my teeth in the business in transport logistics, and I think, you know, as a career, it's been fascinating to be able to move through different disciplines within the area of supply chain, and also to be able to work across different parts of Australia. And then when moving into Asia, I've lived in Indonesia, Thailand, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Singapore, and worked in different roles in those countries as well. So I've found it to be an extremely challenging area to work, and pharma, especially with the quality space that I've been working for the past few years, is a particularly interesting area to work. Very rapidly changing. And to be able to, you know, put in place a quality management system and have oversight of a quality management system for products that you know, are going to be used in the treatment of patients is a really important role. So I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy you know, the oversight of the business and the team that works with me, and enabling that team to be able to do what they do in the quality space as well.
Thank you, Brett. Brett, my next question to you really would be around the COVID-19 scenario. As we all know, the COVID-19 vaccine has actually brought out the pharma cold chain into the mainstream, right? So all of the challenges that come around shipping in a cold chain environment, especially when it's shipped to parts of the world where people are not used to first world cold chain management techniques, is being talked about. Brett, you have spent a lot of time running and managing large cold chains. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the scenarios that contribute to this risk that's being widely discussed?
Yeah, I think that you know, working in Asia as we do, and the business that we have covers 13 countries across Asia, and many of them, you know, like the Philippines and Indonesia, are obviously geographically quite diverse. And I guess, you know, one of the major challenges, you know, for pharma distribution in general is probably the quality of the infrastructure that's available in each country, and that can be around the ports of entry with airports and with seaports, and then the in-country infrastructure around road systems, and you know, sometimes the potential for disruption through the impacts of climate with floods and typhoons and those types of things. So, you know, we have to design you know, our infrastructure and our systems to be pretty robust to deal with those types of things. I think certainly you know, COVID and the, you know, the supply chain impacts has certainly brought supply chain to the front page and into the broadsheet. But I think from a pharma perspective, you know, we've been operating in Asia for nearly 100 years, and certainly in that time we've built a pretty robust system and compliance to international standards. So we do handle a significant proportion of vaccines today, and I'd say that we've seen evolutions in terms of the storage infrastructure available and the packaging systems that are available, the devices, the temperature monitoring devices that we use to give us visibility of temperature, and how we integrate these components into an ecosystem which provides the right storage temperatures and maintains those through to delivery to the patient. I think that certainly the geographical challenges are probably the ones that have been the biggest to overcome in the past. But certainly the development of, as I say, packaging systems, passive packaging systems that we've seen in the last 5-6 years has really improved capabilities in that respect. And so the ability to maintain temperatures within specification in the past with packaging systems would be 36 to 48 hours, but today can be 96 to 120 hours. So the technology's had a big impact, and I think that's helped to secure the provenance of the product to hospitals and pharmacies and drugstores and that sort of thing, and then to the patient.
Brett, if I was to visualize the entire supply chain for this distribution of vaccines, what are all the places where things could go wrong, or maybe Murphy could happen? You've spent a lot of time here, so I think you must have seen a lot of practical scenarios, and you would probably be well prepared to address them before even they occur. But for somebody who is learning the pharma supply chain or who is from another industry, what would those scenarios be, or what are those risk points in the supply chain?
Yeah, I touched on the risk areas of ports of entry, so airports and seaports, particularly for those countries that are geographically diverse, as I mentioned. So Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, I guess, where there are situations where the product can be exposed to extreme temperatures during loading or unloading. And sometimes in the case of refrigerated containers in shipping ports, and the disconnection from power, sometimes you can get situations where that takes longer than it should. And so we can see deviations occur because of the power disconnection. But I'd say that when we look at international ports, airports and seaports, the international standards have improved to a point where the risk has been very much reduced in many of the airports that we operate or that operate in the countries where we are today. And many of the airport managers and the airlines have also improved their standards, become aligned with quality standards like IATA's CEIV quality certification. So that's helped to address the inbound risk. I guess where we're doing branch transfers, we still have some areas of risk, and that's one of the reasons why we've been helped with the improvement in packaging systems to address those key risk areas. I think also in handling the storage infrastructure that we have, the packaging systems we have, it's important that we give the right level of education and training to our teams that are involved in working with those in those areas and with those components, preparing those components for packing and shipping, that everything follows the required procedures from preparation ice gels or the PCMs that we're using, right through to the way that the pack out is prepared prior to putting product into the temperature controlled packaging system, and then how that's packed in terms of the delivery vehicles and then transported. So the training processes and the guidelines and the SOPs that we put around that, and the way that we manage the teams that are involved in that process is pretty important. And those are probably some of the key risk areas that we see.
Brett, you touched upon temperature monitoring devices. So the pharma industry is very, very familiar with data loggers, and it's been treated as the gold standard in pharma cold chains for decades now. So do you think it continues to solve the problem that you're talking about, or is it time for the pharma industry to look beyond just passive data loggers?
Yeah, I think certainly the passive devices that we've used in the past have given, where situations are good, where we have validated packaging systems and validated transit lanes that we use. The data loggers have the capability to confirm that we have the correct systems in place. But it's always a retrospective review from a passive device, and I guess as an industry we're looking to identify ways to become more proactive and more capable of preventive management. And so I think this is what's pushing an increased focus on how do we move to real-time capabilities for alerts, not so much real-time data capture, because that's a normal part of a passive device, but real-time alerts, or an increasing availability of integrations with IoT technologies to be able to speed up the alert receiving process, which may allow some form of responding action as part of a shipment. So I think certainly that that penetration of IoT, the penetration of, or the growing capabilities of real-time alerts, that's kind of the base improvement in the device. I think the communications technology to support the use of this equipment is also important. So we're starting to see improvements in telecoms infrastructure around the region that are helping these systems perform better. And I think real-time alerts will certainly, or the ability to generate real-time alerts will help enormously to reduce quality risk. I think also the ability to capture the data and use the data is probably an area of greater focus than it was in the past. And I think traditionally device providers had their data capture platforms which were pretty much proprietary to the devices, but we're starting to see the ability to have more agnostic data capture platforms that then can be integrated back into, in our situation, the business support platform that we have in place, being able to capture that data and download that data directly.
Brett, you obviously must be having some experience, working with some of these IoT and data platforms. So what do you think is working today in terms of technological capability, and where do you see that some of these technologies need to evolve?
I think we're still at the fairly early stages of integration with IoT, and the ability, as I was talking about earlier, the ability to generate those real-time alerts. I think, in the past, devices have been a balance of how do we have enough battery, battery power to be able to sustain the device versus how do we capture data versus how do we transmit data. And there's been a little bit of a battle between those three requirements inside, the confines of the device itself. But I think technology's allowing battery sizes and power to decrease in size, and data transmitting capability to improve. And the ability to access the cloud directly is reducing the requirement for data capture within the device as well. So I think these are some of the tech evolutions that we're starting to see. It's always a little bit challenging to get through the qualification and validation process of these devices, which in pharma is a really important step prior to really operationalising the use of devices and data capture platforms. It's a requirement that has kind of carried over from good manufacturing practice in the manufacturing side into good distribution practice in distribution. So we're at the early stages of, I think, the next step for devices and the use of devices. And then I think, as I mentioned, the future will be how do we start to more effectively use that data, and how can we more effectively integrate that data into other data systems or data pools that we have available.
Brett, this brings me to actually two interesting questions about what you said. So one is you're talking about these sensors and the platforms. What are some of the pharma regulations that these technologies need to comply with before they come to a pharma user like you, or any pharma company for that matter? My second question is around the data capabilities that you talked about. So one is the sensor data, but what other data sources are really important for you to visualize what's happening to your shipment or your distribution lane in real time?
Yeah, I think in terms of the quality requirements around the devices, I talked a little bit about qualification and validation of the devices, and also the calibration of the devices. So they need to be able to perform within very specific requirements. The temperature ranges that they're capable of measuring must be within very strict specifications. The minimum period of time between data being logged is fairly tightly specified, and
especially for your last mile
yes.
mile deliveries, right, where you cannot have a blank spot.
No, that's right, and particularly important even as we review data from a data integrity perspective, that there are no gaps in the data, that we have a consistent record of temperature right through. Also, as we download data from devices, and again related to data integrity, we need to make sure that there's no opportunity for any of the users of the system to be able to manipulate any data, and that it remains, the integrity of the data is maintained right through the process as well.
Are there any certifications that come into play here which give that confidence to the pharma industry?
Sorry, any?
Are there any kind of certifications that come into play, Brett, which give that confidence on these IoT sensors to the pharma industry?
Yeah, so in most cases we require a calibration certificate to be supplied with the devices, and this can be quite challenging to find whether the manufacturer themselves is going to provide the calibration or whether the calibration needs to be performed within the country where we're operating. But in many cases, it's the manufacturer themselves that are providing the calibration certificate, and recertification is usually on a minimum of an annual basis. So this process needs to be considered from a cost perspective as well, because it's not always cheap.
Yeah.
In many cases, it can be actually cheaper to buy a new device than it is to have the device recalibrated.
Yes, and Brett, talking about the second piece, which is about the data, what are some of the data sources that you'd like to see that you spoke about, which is beyond just temperature, which is coming from the IoT sensors?
Yeah, I think that as we look at initiatives that are being launched under Industry 4.0 and Supply Chain 4.0 and Quality 4.0, we start to see a broader integration to data sets that come from the company's business platform. And also external data sets that might be from like unstructured data from an EQMS, an electronic quality management system, or potentially from other information sources such as natural disaster monitoring sites or temperature and humidity monitoring sites. Anything that can kind of impact the potential condition of the delivery process can also be quite helpful. And I think being able to integrate that data and then be able to use some of the tool sets from artificial intelligence and machine learning and robotic process automation to start to improve predictive capabilities and I guess when you look at the analytics maturity curve, how you can push the organisation up the maturity curve through predictive to prescriptive and into cognitive analytical capability that gives you a much more effective risk prevention capability. So I think that'll be the future. There's a lot of integrating platforms or integrating software that's also being made available from a number of different suppliers, but I think it'll take some time to build out that capability.
Absolutely, Brett. And I think what you're really driving to here, which is very interesting, is that the time to react seems to be very critical for you, because what you really want is you want the system to tell you what I should do without having to figure out what this particular temperature excursion, for example, means. You want to know that a temperature excursion is happening, where it's happening, what is probably causing it, and who I should contact in my chain of custody to actually rectify it.
Yeah, exactly, and it's really it's moving from the corrective approach of the past to a more preventive capability in the future. Yes.
Let me shift gears a bit, and here's something that I observed about your experience. You've actually worked with the quality side of things, and you worked with the distribution side of things. A lot of times I learned that these two departments have a lot of tussles, because one is trying to improve the quality of the product and spend more on it, while the other department is trying to typically optimize cost, find more cost-effective methods to get the product across from one area to another. So how have you been handling some of these conflicting priorities? I think since you've been part of both these teams, we could get some insights from you here.
I think that's a good question. I think the role of quality is particularly important, and And I think I talked right at the start about a quality management system, and quality's role in the governance of a quality management system is to be able to interpret change that's being pushed through the system, from regulatory change or supply chain change or technology change, and be able to build that QMS in a way that the operations team are going to be able to adapt to the required changes most easily. I think the traditional view of quality has been as a policeman, and that's because we've seen a highly operational nature of quality, and what we're trying to do is to kind of build a more effective quality culture through the organisation, to bring quality back into its role as governance and looking at quality assurance rather than being directly involved in the operational side, and give the process owners more responsibility for the way that they're managing their process. I think that when we take quality out of its functional silo and we start to embed it at the start of end-to-end scenarios that we're looking at from an operations perspective, we get a better result. In the manufacturing sector, they talk about quality by design, and I think that's what we're looking at to kind of build to break down the potential conflict scenarios by building quality into the process right at the very beginning. So there's an ongoing process of review from a quality perspective right through the delivery of changes that we might make to infrastructure or systems or technology or process. And when we look at it from that holistic perspective, and we implement from a holistic perspective, it takes the conflict out of the scenario. And I think that through the COVID period, we've probably seen, we talked about how supply chains have become much more prevalent and much more obvious to the general public. I think also that when we look at quality practitioners of the future, they're going to need to be able to have a skill set and an understanding that includes supply chain capabilities and even technology. So familiarity with the attributes and the components of digital transformation, because to be able to build and manage the quality management system in the future, they have to have that understanding. So no quality person is going to be purely quality in the future. They're going to have a range of skills that help them to manage the quality of the business most effectively. And I think when you can understand both sides of the discussion, it really helps to reduce the potential conflict.
Excellent, Brett. That's very insightful because, like you said, quality has always been viewed as the policeman. Is there any example you have where you're able to describe this change, something that you've come across where quality has actually been working hand in hand in designing the distribution process?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we look at is typically we have metrics around non-conformance and deviations that might occur, and we look at the trends of data that we have on monthly, quarterly, annual basis, helps us to identify specific risk areas, and a part of the work that we do with the operations team is to identify specific projects for improvement, and teams that are made up of both quality and operations people are using the data that we've taken from the non-conformance risk analysis and using that to build a project to improve whatever contributing factors we've identified through that risk analysis and proactively address that for the future. And we've seen that work very, very successfully. And there's a number of projects, around operational readiness and also in situations where we're performing secondary repackaging and changes to the production processes that improve output and quality of results. So there's been a number of examples where we've seen that work effectively.
Excellent, Brett. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. If there's one thing that you'd like to leave the viewers with in terms of a message as a pharma professional working on quality and improving distribution at this critical time, what would that be?
I think we have a very important job to do in terms of the way that we manage product, the integrity and the quality of the product, to ensure that patient health and safety is maintained. And that's a key objective for us at all times. I guess in these COVID times, there's certainly a huge focus on how COVID vaccines will be managed and how they will get to the required populations in the different geographies, and that's an extremely important priority for us as an organisation. But I also think that we have the existing base business which needs to continue to operate, and we have a need to continue to serve the patients with the products that they've used in the past and will continue to use in the future. So I think it's how we continue to perform our role. We've overcome the challenges of COVID in many ways, and we have a very robust operating model. We make sure that we look after our people and our systems for the future to be able to maintain that capability.
Well said, Brett. Thank you so much again for participating in this tech podcast. It was very insightful to me, at least, and I think all the pharma supply chain professionals, quality professionals, and even supply chain professionals outside of pharma would have got a lot of insight into everything that you shared about technology, about quality and distribution working together, and your experience of all the risks that need to be mitigated in advance in this critical supply chain which caters to patients around the world. Thank you, Brett. It was wonderful having you.
Thanks, Premsai.
Hi, my name is Scott Mears and I'm one of the hosts of the Supply Chain Tech podcast with Roamby. On this podcast, we talk to supply chain heroes from around the world about everything, ranging from the disruptions related to supply chains, their personal experiences with tracking technologies, strategies to build resilience, and much, much more. We already have some recommended videos for you to the side of me, and if any of this sounds interesting to you, do subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss another Roamby video. I'll see you next time.